Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Victoria met her future husband in the factory canteen. She was 26 years old at the time. She was walking with a tray to a free table as she was pushed unintentionally by a stranger. The push was not strong, but the girl was outraged by the very fact that the guy did not even apologize afterwards. Victoria looked at the man and deliberately loudly said, "Here men went, pushed and considered such behavior as in the order of things." "Are you talking to me?" said the stranger and looked at the young woman confused. "Exactly to you. You didn't even deign to apologize. I could have knocked that tray over myself," she said irritably. "I'm sorry. I'm very embarrassed. I was just thinking, I've had a rough day today," the stranger said glumly. "Just because you've had a bad day doesn't mean you have to push people around." "Okay, be more careful in the future," Victoria said and went to the table, where she soon began to eat. And just a few minutes later, the same guy who pushed her sat down. The guy whose name was Barry again apologized and offered to get acquainted. The girl did not refuse, and soon the young people were eagerly chatting. And when the lunch break was over, they agreed to meet after work for a walk. The young people met when the workday was over. They walked slowly through the evening city and took turns telling each other about themselves. The girl learned that the guy was 28 years old. He lived with his parents. Victoria also told about herself that she lived with her grandmother in a small house on the outskirts of the city. She also said that she did not remember her parents for a long time, as her mother and father died in an accident when she was 8 years old. The boy, hearing this, offered his condolences to the interlocutor. The young people walked for about 2 hours, and then the guy walked the girl home. When saying goodbye, the man asked Victoria for her phone number and asked permission to call today. The interlocutress smiled in response and said, "And why do you ask permission?" "Because we just had such a great walk with you, and do you really think that I will forbid you to call me?" "I asked just in case. I just don't want to part with you, but I know I have to," the guy said quietly. "When you meet me for the first time, tell me you're in love," Victoria exclaimed, either seriously or jokingly. Who knows, said Barry thoughtfully. After this meeting, the young people began to see each other often and spend time together. A couple of weeks after meeting the guy, Victoria introduced the young man to her grandmother, Selina. The old lady immediately appreciated the decency of the man, which she then told her granddaughter. The girl, in response to her grandmother, only smiled. And after a while, Barry introduced Victoria to his parents, introducing the young woman as his fiancée, which was very confusing to Victoria because they did not even have a hint of talk about a joint family life. Therefore, as soon as the couple left the guy's apartment, after meeting his parents, asked Barry, "Why did you introduce me to my father and mother as your fiancée?" "I did everything right. Why would I introduce a girl to my parents if I don't care about her? I was going to propose to you today. And I really hope you don't say no. I feel good with you, and I'm drawn to you all the time. Can I not describe all my feelings, but just say that I love you?" said the man quietly. "You know how to surprise me," she said confusedly. "That's not an answer to my proposal," Barry said. "I wish I could refuse you, but I can't, because I love you too. And it seems to me that you and I are made for each other," Victoria said, embarrassed. "You know how to surprise me with your question, too," I said about the bride. "You asked, and I even forgot that I had a surprise hidden for you to make a proposal with him," the guy said with a smile and pulled out of a pocket of his windbreaker a red box, which he handed to the girl. Victoria opened the box and involuntarily gasped. There was a thin gold ring. The young woman looked fondly at her lover and then tried on the jewelry. The ring suited the girl in size. She laughed happily and then tenderly kissed her lover on the lips. That same evening, Victoria informed her grandmother that she would soon marry Barry. Selina nodded approvingly to her granddaughter. This guy, who had already been to their house repeatedly, took a liking to the older woman. The old lady thought that for her Victoria, this man would be an attentive, caring, and faithful spouse. Selina even, and herself, did not know why she thought so. She had these thoughts went on a subconscious level. Therefore, the elderly woman gladly gave her blessing to her granddaughter. Soon the young people applied to the registry office, and after some time played a modest wedding. After marriage, the newlyweds decided to live at Victoria's house, as it was necessary to look after Selina, who had been ill a lot lately. Victoria, having married, considered herself the happiest woman, as she loved her chosen one with all her heart. And the girl saw how the newly married husband to her carefully and reverently treats. Barry's attitude to his wife noticed in Selina, who thanked the Almighty more than once that gave her granddaughter the chance to meet this young man. Time moved forward leisurely. The young family lived soul to soul, which pleased the relatives. Victoria sometimes even laughed about it and said to her husband, "We have been living together for a year, and we have never had a fight. Maybe let's do it for the sake of decency. I have factory women telling me how they fight with their husbands. Sometimes they ask me if we're fighting, and I just throw my hands up in the air because we've never had a fight. Why should we share a blanket with you if we sleep well and cozily under it? You and I are like one. That's why we can't fight. Be happy about it, my love," Barry said softly, and then kissed his wife tenderly on the lips. 2 years after the wedding, Victoria began to worry that she could not get pregnant, and her husband had recently repeatedly hinted that it was time for them to become parents. The young woman was lost in speculation, why she and her husband could not conceive a child, and she decided to talk about this topic with her friend Ariana. Victoria went to visit her friend and told her, "I cannot understand anything. We live with my husband great, and I cannot get pregnant from him in any way. I don't even know why. Why are you racking your brains? You should go and see a doctor." I couldn't get pregnant for a year, so I went to a gynecologist. The doctor prescribed me some pills and vitamins. I drank the prescribed course of medical drugs, and the result is on the face. After some time has already registered for pregnancy and childbirth. And the result was that I had Christine, and later I had a son, Ariana said. "Maybe you're right. I'm going on vacation soon, so I'll go to the doctor's. The thought of children keeps me awake. I want a baby so badly. And my husband's parents also recently inquired when we will give them a grandchild, and I even in response and say nothing," said the interlocutor. Victoria, in fact, as soon as she went on vacation, then immediately visited the clinic, where the doctor, after taking all the tests, she reported that her health is fine. The doctor suggested to the young woman that her spouse should also undergo an examination. The young woman thanked the gynecologist for the advice, and that same evening started a conversation with Barry. She said, "You know that I've been missing these days at the doctor's office. So I was told today that my health is fine. I want you to go to the clinic too. Maybe you're the reason I can't get pregnant. Okay, I'll take the day off and do what you're asking me to do. Don't worry, we'll have a baby, and more than one," the man said affectionately. Sometime later, Barry told his wife that he'd been examined and his health was good. The couple was puzzled as to why there was such a problem in their family. They could not understand why, when they have everything perfectly with their health. But at the same time, a young woman cannot get pregnant. Then Barry's parents arrived, and the mother-in-law again asked her daughter-in-law when she would please them with the news that she was preparing to become a mom. Victoria couldn't bear the question and ran off to the bedroom. The guest looked perplexed at her son and mumbled, "What did I say that made Victoria react like that? Mom." The subject of children is a sore subject for her. She and I have been examined. Both of us are in great health, but it's no use. Victoria can't get pregnant, Barry said quietly. "Oh, that's what this is all about. Well, why doesn't she tell me about it? I'll go talk to her," the woman said. The mother-in-law came in and hugged her quietly. then advised her to go to church and pray to the Virgin Mary. Barry's mother said that turning to the saints often helped people in various difficult life situations. Victoria thanked her mother-in-law and promised that she would do so at the weekend. However, visiting the church and pleading for pregnancy to the Mother of God did not help the young woman. A few more years passed, and acquaintances were saying that Victoria was a barren woman. About these rumors learned Selina, who sympathized with her granddaughter, that she cannot get pregnant. The old lady was very worried that rumors about infertility will reach Victoria. So in order to protect her granddaughter from worries, she began to tell her acquaintances that Victoria and her husband want to live for themselves for some time. Selina really wanted to help Victoria in solving her problem, but she didn't know how. And once the elderly woman watched the program Battle of the Psychics, and it struck her that her granddaughter could be helped by a sorceress or a grandmother, Selina ran to the kiosk where she bought a newspaper. She found there an ad where hereditary witch helps people in various critical life situations. The elderly woman, not thinking long, called this lady and told her about her granddaughter's problem. The sorceress listened to the interlocutor and then named the cost of the session to her, and at the same time added, "I need your granddaughter to come to me herself. I have to study her aura, and only then it will be known what complexity of the rite will be required." "I agree. She will come to your town within this week," the old woman said happily. As soon as Victoria came home from work, her grandmother told her about the hereditary sorceress she had enrolled her with. The girl looked apprehensively at her grandmother and quietly said, "You can't trust these psychics. They are mostly charlatans and swindlers. Your sorceress probably had time to voice the sum for the session." "Yes, but it's not much money. I'll give you the money. Don't worry about it." "And why do you label psychics as charlatans?" "I trusted this witch. Her name is Julianne." "Don't argue with me, baby. Maybe this sorceress will help you. You want to have a baby, so you need to try all the ways," said the grandmother persuasively. "I'm afraid Barry won't approve," she said. "Don't worry about him. I can convince Barry that you need to go to this hereditary sorceress," Selina said. A few days later, Victoria was on a bus to another city. In her mind, she prayed that Julianne would not be a charlatan and would help her. And a few hours later, Victoria sat at the sorceress, who made some passes over her head and at the same time, something quietly muttered. These actions continued for about 10 minutes, and then the landlady sat down in an armchair and said, "On your husband has laid eyes on a woman who wants to take him away from the family. She has put a jinx on you so that you can't get pregnant. Remove this evil eye will not be easy, but it is possible. I will tell you right away, but the right will not be cheap, because I will have to spend my inner energy, and after that, it will take a long time to restore your own health. But it's up to you. I never force anyone." Victoria listened to the woman with a mesmerized look. She sincerely believed the hereditary sorceress that she could help her. Victoria promised the lady that in a week she would appear again with the required sum, and after that the visitor went back to her town. As soon as Victoria arrived home, she told her spouse and grandmother about everything. Barry, when he heard how much money was needed for the ritual, he involuntarily clucked his tongue and softly said, "Do not you think, my dear women, that this so-called hereditary sorceress is not a psychic at all, but a natural swindler, who thus earns her living? Barry, you're wrong. I've spoken to Julianne, and I've even seen her thank you notes in her special notebook. She gave me the numbers of 2 of her clients that she helped so that I could check her words with fervor, said Victoria. Her clients could be simple fake ladies. But if you're so sure that this sorceress will help you, then go. You and I have a little money set aside for a car, but it's half enough, and it's a long way to the paycheck," said the husband, puzzled. Here, Selina intervened in the conversation, who had been listening to the dialogue of her household. The woman said, "Keep your money to yourself. I have finances that I save for a rainy day, so I'll give them to you. Let Victoria use the cash for a good cause. Grandma, I love you so much. Thank you so much. We'll pay you back soon, the girl said with tears in her eyes. And just a week later, Victoria visited the sorceress again. The landlady conducted a magic ritual which lasted about 40 minutes. And then Juliana handed the visitor a bag with a herbal collection and told her how to brew the potion and in what quantities to drink. After that, the sorceress said that the spell had been removed from Victoria, but that she would become pregnant in 6 months at the earliest. Victoria came home overjoyed. The woman believed that she would soon become a mom. However, a year passed and the long-awaited pregnancy never came. Victoria felt devastated as she already knew that she had not contacted a sorceress, but an ordinary con artist as suggested by her husband. And the woman found out about it in the simplest way. She again went to Juliana, but the apartment was already inhabited by completely different people who said that they had rented their apartment for 6 months and also added that this Juliana is looking for not only her, but also other people. A couple more years passed and Sarah died. At the cemetery, Victoria sobbed inconsolably as she mourned her loved one. The woman apologized to her grandmother for never being able to give her a great-granddaughter, which the grandmother also dreamed of, as well as Victoria herself. The husband at this time stood next to and hugged the chosen one, trying to somehow words to support in this difficult minute wife. A couple of months after the funeral, Victoria began to notice that her husband often began to linger after work. The woman became nervous about it. She involuntarily thought that Barry had another woman on the side. She tried to push these thoughts away from herself, but each delay of the chosen one gave more and more reasons to assume that Barry has a mistress. And one day, when her husband came again later than usual, she could not stand it and angrily said, "You and I used to leave work together all the time. And then you began to tell me that you still have urgent business at the factory and delayed. I understand that there are emergencies, but you've already made a habit of it. How can you explain it to me? Just please don't start telling me again that you really have things to do with the plant. Just admit that you're seeing someone else. Stop talking nonsense. If I had another woman, I'd tell you honestly, I don't need to deceive you. I really work, but not at the factory. I hid this fact from you on purpose, because I knew that you would be against this work," said the man tiredly. "And where do you work part-time?" asked the wife. "Unloading railroad cars. If I told you about it before, you would have immediately spoken out against it, because you constantly tell me that with my sciatica, heavy things cannot be carried. And I wanted to make you a birthday present and buy you that cell phone that you liked. I did not even expect that after so many years of marriage. You can think of me in such a ridiculous way that I have an affair on the side," said Barry. "But why didn't you tell me? I really thought you were having an Oliver on the side since you've been coming in late. And just when I want to make love to you, you tell me you're tired. Tell me what I should have thought." Victoria almost cried. "Anything you want, but not about the fact that I have a mistress on the side," said the man. "I love you so much, Barry. I'm sorry I thought that about you. It's just that I'm so nervous about not having kids, and I know you're nervous about it too," she said. "I offered you to take a baby from the orphanage, but you don't want to. I've long since accepted the fact that we don't have children. It's just the way it's meant to be," Barry said. "I'm thinking about the orphanage. The only thing stopping me from taking that step is that I won't be able to love someone else's child." Victoria sighed sorrowfully. After this conversation, a month passed, and the woman came home after work in a high mood. Her friend told her that in the neighboring town there was a doctor who had moved there recently, and he was a gynecologist. And also the friend said that this doctor is very well spoken about, and said that he just works miracles. The friend advised to go to this doctor. Maybe he can establish the reason why a woman for so many years does not get pregnant. The friend immediately warned that it was necessary to make an appointment with the gynecologist in advance by phone and visit him for a fee. Victoria was ready to sacrifice her savings, which she and her husband were saving for a car, so that the doctor could help her. The woman told her spouse about everything in the evening and asked Barry, "Could this be our last chance?" Do you think I should go, or don't you think it's all useless at my age because I'm already in my 40s? You're still in the prime of your life. I know that if I discourage you from going, you'll blame yourself for not insisting on your decision. So I'm not stopping you from going. Call and check with the clinic and don't forget to make an appointment. I don't think the equipment in our small town is as powerful as where you're going, Barry said. Soon Victoria arrived in the other town for her gynecologist's appointment. She arrived too early before the doctor's appointment time, so she decided to walk through the market. Victoria was examining the stalls with clothes and then noticed a beautiful men's t-shirt. The woman did not hesitate to buy the thing and then went to the doctor's appointment. Victoria entered the clinic in a good mood with thoughts that today will definitely be a good day for her. The woman wanted to look at herself in a small mirror, which was in her purse. And then Victoria saw that the reticule was open. She began to look for a purse with some anxiety, which was not there. The woman saw a couch and went over to it and sat down, and then began to put everything out of her purse. She searched for the purse and soon realized that it simply wasn't there. Victoria initially did not understand what had happened, and then realized that she had been robbed at the market. The woman covered her face with her palms and cried silently. Victoria was not so upset that her purse had been stolen, but rather that she would not be able to see a doctor because she did not have the money to pay for a doctor's appointment. The woman sat on a bench and just cried from the hopelessness of the situation because she was in a foreign city and she did not even have money for the return trip. Victoria mentally blamed herself for going to the market because that's where her purse had been stolen. The woman was crying and couldn't stop her tears when suddenly someone touched her shoulder. She took her hands away from her face and looked at the person who had touched her. It turned out to be a pretty middle-aged stranger who said anxiously, "I'm sorry to bother you, but you seem to have something wrong. Maybe I can help you?" Victoria looked at the woman and immediately noticed that she was very pregnant. Victoria looked enviously at her belly and said, "I probably won't be helped by anything or anyone in this life anymore." "Don't say that. There is always a way out of any dead-end situation. You just have to believe in it," said the woman with a smile. "It's easy for you to say. You will soon become a mom, and I have been dreaming about it for so many years and what I have not done for it. And today I specifically came here to the gynecologist so that he examined me and gave his verdict. But it didn't go the way I planned, and as a result my purse was stolen. So not only will I not get to the doctor, I don't even know how to get home because I don't have money for the return trip," Victoria said, barely restraining herself from bursting into tears. And the stranger, having heard it, sat down next to her and embraced the woman with the words, "You now calm down to begin with. In life it happens like this, when a string of failures, and then suddenly in luck, I have already had such a thing. And also hold my belly, they say that if a pregnant woman is stroked on her belly, a woman who has not given birth will soon become pregnant." Victoria looked at the girl, and suddenly she had an unbearable urge to tell everything about herself. She didn't understand why this urge had come to her. She thought that the stranger would interrupt her, but she sat and listened silently and only stroked her hand. Victoria told what she had done to get pregnant, but all her attempts were unsuccessful. And with every word, the woman felt that she was getting better. At the end of her story, Victoria said, "You have no idea how much I want to become a mommy and hug my own baby. It seems to me that for the sake of my desire, I am ready to go to the end of the world and go through all the difficulties of life." The stranger, as soon as Victoria stopped talking, took out a purse from her purse and took out some banknotes and handed them to her interlocutor with the words, "Here is the money. Enough for you to go to your scheduled appointment today, and also to drive back home. I see that you are a decent person, and I just cannot help you in this situation. By the way, my name is Maria, and yet pat my belly. But you're giving a lot of money, and you don't know me at all. What if I'm some kind of scammer who breeds such stories people to make a living?" "Pup," said Victoria, who could not understand how you can give money to a stranger, and Maria heard the interlocutor smiled and spoke back. "I don't believe that you are a bad person, as you spoke sincerely about yourself. A liar can't lie like that. But how can I pay you back? I'm not from this town. I have the money at home, but at the moment I am not at home, Victoria said with the same bewilderment. Write me your address and I'll come to visit you. It will be an opportunity to have a heart, to hot talk if you don't mind my visit. Don't forget to write and phone number. Softly said the interlocutor and added, and on my belly you still stroke my belly, and suddenly folk belief does not deceive. After the women said goodbye warmly, and Maria left. And Victoria looked after her new acquaintance in thoughtfulness. She thought that now this Maria was like a good fairy from a fairy tale, who helped her in a difficult situation. Soon Victoria visited a gynecologist, who said that it was necessary to make an examination. And then the woman returned home and told her husband about the visit to the doctor, as well as about meeting Maria. Barry was also surprised by Maria's action and said that there are still good people in this world. Victoria soon underwent an examination, but the doctor did not reveal any pathology in the woman, and on the patient's question why she could not get pregnant, only waved his hands. After the doctor's visit, Victoria fully realized that she and her husband would be able to become parents if only they took a baby from the orphanage. The woman thought about adopting a child. She even specifically went to the orphanage. She looked at the children and asked herself a question. Would she be able to love someone else's boy as her own? And to this question she found no answer. Victoria was in a state of confusion, as she did not know what to do, and in this regard turned to her husband. I went to the orphanage and observed the children. I am worried that I will not be able to love the adopted child. Tell me what to do in this situation. I can only tell you that you are not ready to become a mother yet, if you are wondering whether or not you can love a baby from an orphanage. Understand, my dear, that if you adopt a child, you need to accept it with all your heart, said the husband. I understand you. Perhaps you are right, said his wife sadly. After this conversation was a little more than a year, and the couple was sitting at home in the late evening and watching TV, and then the head of the family heard a dog barking in the yard. The man looked perplexed at his wife and asked her a question. Are you expecting someone? No, of course not. At this time of night, people go to bed. But the dog obviously smells a visitor. Go and see who the woodsman has brought there, said his wife. Barry put on his jacket and went out of the house. And in a few minutes he came back with a carrier in which the baby was sleeping. He handed the baby to his wife without a word and immediately jumped out of the house again. Victoria looked perplexed at the baby and did not know what to think. The woman gently stroked the baby's cheek with her hand and then carefully took the baby out of the carrier. She pressed the boy to her and began to rock him quietly. Her husband caught her doing this. He returned a short time later. Barry came over to her and looked at the baby, and then said that when he first left the house, he saw that there was a carrier in the yard, and then noticed a female figure who looked back and ran away. The head of the family then paused and continued further. I gave the baby to you and ran after the woman, as it was clearly she who had dropped off the baby for us. But I did not have time, as the stranger got into a car and drove away. I did not notice the license plate number. He's an angel. He's about a year old, Victoria said in response to her husband's words. We need to report this to the police, Barry said. Are you crazy? It's almost nighttime. You need to undress the baby now and let him sleep well, said the woman, and gently began to undress the boy. And then Victoria saw that the child had only one sock on his feet, on which the letter B was embroidered. The woman perplexedly muttered, why would the mother cuckoo wear only one sock? Meanwhile, Barry was examining the carrier, where he found a small slip of paper that read, Please take care of the baby. The man walked over to his wife and held out the note. Victoria silently read the note and said with dislike that the mother of the baby was selfish for giving the child to strangers in such a way. The head of the family wanted to object to his wife, but at the last moment changed his mind. Victoria spent the night near the baby, admiring his tiny face. She gently touched the boy's blonde curls and thought to herself that perhaps it was fate that the cuckoo mother had planted this baby in their house and not in another. Early in the morning the boy whimpered. and the woman immediately took him in her arms and quietly began to say in his ear, "Don't be afraid. We won't give you any offense. Now I'll make you porridge and we'll have breakfast." And with these words, Victoria, with the child in her arms, went to the kitchen. After a while, Barry joined his wife and repeated again that they should report it to the police. Victoria looked affectionately first at the boy and then at her spouse and asked him not to hurry to go to law enforcement. The man looked at his wife in bewilderment and muttered, "What do you mean, don't hurry? What are you doing?" "This is a sign from above because the baby was dropped off to us, not to the neighbors. I've already named the baby John. We'll leave the boy with us and I'll babysit him. I'll quit my job for that," said the woman. "Have you lost your mind? How can we keep the child with us? Don't you realize that the boy may have grandparents or other relatives who are going crazy not knowing where the kid is? And in general, there is a probability that this child was kidnapped by some mentally ill woman and then planted him to us," said the head of the family. "Honey, don't make a fuss or you'll scare John. No one stole him. The boy was dropped off by the cuckoo mother, as evidenced by the note. Barry, look at this little guy. He's not even afraid of us. It's the first time he's seen us. I've taken this boy with all my heart and I don't want to part with him for a minute. And about the fact that the child is wanted by other relatives, I do not believe it because the mother, Cuckoo, would have left the baby to grandmother or grandfather and not planted to strangers," said Victoria. "You are a wise woman and you should realize that we can't keep this child just like that. It must only be officially adopted. If we do not do it, then both of us will go to jail. Understand, my love, that the baby can get sick, and how will you go to the clinic with him when you don't know the boy's date of birth? And in general, what will we tell people about the fact that we have a child in the family?" said the man with irritation. "Let him stay with us at least a few days. I'm not interested in people's rumors. Honey, I beg you to please give in to me. I'm only asking for a few days for John to stay with us. I'll take a vacation at my own expense today," the woman complained. "All right, have it your way. But only 3 days and no more. Only with this agreement I agree," said the head of the family, who saw how his wife looks at the baby with maternal love. Victoria took a vacation at work at her own expense and fondly babysat John, calling him son. She sang bedtime songs, made milk porridge, and told him children's stories. Barry watched all this and realized that his wife had really accepted the boy with all her heart. 3 days had passed since the baby had been dropped off, and the man reminded his wife that it was time to report the boy to the authorities. Victoria looked at her husband in horror and with tears in her eyes began to beg her spouse again for some more time to delay. Barry listened to the chosen one, and he was truly sorry for his beloved. But he realized that the boy's stay in the family could then turn against them serious consequences. So the man this time said to his wife, "I too, John is dear to me, as well as to you, but understand he cannot all the time in secret stay with us. The only thing I can offer you is to adopt him, but first you have to tell me that the boy was given to us, and we didn't steal him. Do you promise me that John will live with us in the near future?" she said, weeping. "I give you my word as a man that John will be our son. And tomorrow I will report to the police, and we will give up the boy for a while," said the husband. "Okay, but I'll ask you only to buy baby clothes for John today, and we'll keep them, as well as the carrier," said the woman. "But why?" the head of the family asked, perplexed. "It is necessary," said the wife. Barry complied with the wife's request and the next day took the boy to the police, where he told them how the child had been dropped off. The baby was immediately placed in an orphanage. The man returned home in a depressed state, where he saw his wife kissing John's sock and crying. Barry approached his wife and hugged her, then said, "Don't be so heartbroken. You can visit John, and now do not shed tears. We need to collect the relevant documents with you to adopt a child in the very near future. Now it's up to the two of us, how soon our son will live with us. Thank you, sweetheart, for your support. I love you," the woman said. The couple began to collect the relevant documents for adoption. and only a month and a half later the couple was able to take the boy from the orphanage. During this time, Victoria quit her job, bought toys and clothes for John, and she and her husband organized one of the rooms as a nursery. And soon John was living with the family. Victoria was happy because now she was finally a mom, and she had a son whom she loved with all her heart. However, the woman's delight was not understood by everyone, and especially by the neighbors who twirled their fingers at her temple and even reprimanded Victoria out loud. "You are not all at home. You are 40 years old and you took a burden on your neck. It would be better to live in your own pleasure than in your old age to change diapers and take care of someone else's child. It's none of your business. And John is not someone else's child to me, he's my own son. And you, before you sneer and mock us, you'd better look after your own family and keep your nose out of other people's business," Victoria replied to the neighbors. Time slowly moved on, and the boy grew up. And soon John was 3 years old, and Victoria and her husband already wanted to give their son to kindergarten so that he had contact with his peers, as here the child caught a cold. The doctor diagnosed flu and prescribed treatment. Victoria followed the doctor's instructions exactly, but the disease gave a complication to the child's ear, and the boy was hospitalized. Victoria blamed herself for not looking after her son, and that's why he was in the hospital. Barry consoled his wife and asked that his wife did not blame herself. The head of the family told his wife that children at this age are often sick and so close to take it all to heart. In response, Victoria said, "How can you say that? How can you not worry about it? Our son is in the hospital and it's my fault because I didn't see it and I'm a mother. So I had to be always on the lookout. You misunderstood me. I didn't mean that you shouldn't worry at all. I just mean that you're really stressed out. I see you taking sedatives all the time. You just need to be a little calmer about it. Think about it. You're going to make yourself sick, and who's going to be better off? Now calm down, sweetheart. Everything will be all right, and your son will be discharged soon," Barry said. John had been in the hospital for 2 weeks, and all this time, the woman walked several stops just to visit her son. She purposely didn't use transportation to save money to buy sweets and fruit for John. As soon as Victoria was informed that the boy was discharged, she suggested to her husband to please the child and buy the boy a big robot. The woman knew that this toy was expensive, and they had been strained with money lately, as she herself was not working. But still Victoria asked her husband to agree with the purchase of this gift for John. Barry did not object, and the couple bought a robot, which they handed to the baby on the day of discharge. The boy was delighted. He laughed and took turns hugging his parents. Victoria at that moment realized that for the sake of this laughter of her son is ready to live in starvation, only if her John was not sick and always laughed so cordially. After the boy's discharge, the parents decided not to hurry with the registration of the baby in kindergarten, so that the son a little stronger after the illness. Victoria practiced with John in developing games, and with pleasure went for walks with him. In the evening, the father spent time with the boy, who told his son entertaining stories about pirates and taught him to make paper ships. After a while, the parents enrolled the boy in kindergarten. Victoria immediately got a job, but not at the factory, but as a saleswoman at a newsstand. After the end of the working day, the woman hurried to take her son to the kindergarten. She was always interested in how the kid's day went and what new things he learned from the teacher. Time flew by imperceptibly, and soon John went to the first grade. At the first school rally, Victoria wept because her son had already left one kindergarten and now went to gain knowledge at school. Barry, seeing that his wife secretly wipes tears, involuntarily asked, "Why are your eyes wet?" "It is necessary to rejoice because John went to study and you cry. These are tears of joy. Just time is running so fast because only recently gave your son in kindergarten, and now he is standing on the school line. And you know there is a folk belief that when a child goes to the first grade, the time runs twice as fast. said his wife. 2 years flew by as John went to school. The family lived in peace and harmony as Victoria suddenly felt bad. She came home from work as she suddenly felt a strong pain in the chest area. The woman involuntarily sank down right in the corridor of her apartment. In this position, she was caught by her son, who came from a walk. John, frightened, called his father and reported that his mother did not feel well. Barry, after the words of the child, excused himself from work and rushed home. The man called an ambulance and Victoria was hospitalized and diagnosed with a heart attack. Barry was desperate and worried about his wife, as the doctor said that she was currently on the verge of life and death. The man never really believed in God, but at this point he wanted only one thing to happen to his wife. He could not imagine life. If something happened to her, his beloved was everything in this life, namely, a friend, mistress, and faithful wife. Victoria was discharged only after 3 weeks, and during that time she had spent 5 days in intensive care. Barry, as soon as he learned that the spouse was transferred to the ward, he came to her with a huge bouquet of flowers. He tenderly kissed his beloved and quietly said, "Promise me that you will never scare me like that again. I was going crazy and thought I couldn't bear it all. You have no idea how much I need you in this life. I'm sorry. I didn't know it would turn out like this. I love you too. How's John?" "I must have really scared you," the woman said softly. "It's okay. Don't worry. The main thing is to get well. My son and I only dream about it," said Barry. After discharge from the hospital, the husband asked his wife to quit her job. The woman was surprised by this request and asked why she should do it. Barry gave various arguments to assure his wife that it would be more useful if Victoria would stay at home. However, her husband's arguments did not convince Victoria to agree to quit. Barry, seeing that he couldn't persuade his wife, said, "How can you not realize that I'm acting in good faith? My son and I want to see you healthy and unharmed. You just forgot that monthly do the accounting in the kiosk, and then as a small child nervous about it, and in addition, you have told yourself how many times that you have inadequate buyers, because of which you also then nervous. And I was told by the doctor, after your discharge, that all the excitement you are contraindicated, the essence of the words of the doctor. I think you do not need to decipher. You're worried about me like I'm a little kid. But if I stay at home, it will be hard for us financially, and we will not be able to save up for the car that you have been dreaming of for so long," said the wife. "Yeah, screw the car. We have lived without a car for so many years, and we will live without one for as long. The most important thing for me is that you do not get sick," said the man gently. "You're very persuasive." "Okay, I'll agree with your argument and stay home," the woman said affectionately. Victoria soon quit her job, which pleased the head of the family. At first, the woman was getting used to the new way of life. She was not used to the fact that now in the morning she did not have to hurry to the kiosk and count the hours until the end of the working day. Time passed imperceptibly further, and John was already in the 4th grade. And one day he was coming home from school when he was approached by a strange woman who asked him how he was doing, what his name was, and whether he was baptized. The boy was surprised by the stranger's questions and politely replied that he was doing great and gave his name. And then the stranger smiled at John and told him that he was a nice boy, and then went on her way. John was surprised by the behavior of this strange woman, and when he came home he told his mother about everything. Victoria, as she heard about it, she involuntarily shuddered. The woman involuntarily felt anxious. She did not know why she felt so uneasy. Victoria tried to distract herself from the troubling thoughts, but she could not. Soon Barry came home from work and found her in tears. The man approached his wife with fright and asked what happened. Victoria told about the strange meeting of her son with the stranger. The head of the family smiled in response, hugged his chosen one, and said affectionately, "You found something to be nervous about." So a strange woman approached our son and asked about his affairs. "What's the big deal? I don't see any reason to worry about it at all. I forgot to tell you that a couple of days ago, I got a call on my cell phone from an unknown number, and when I answered it, a woman's voice said my name. Victoria said, "And who called you?" The husband asked me sympathetically. "That's the thing, I don't know who called me." They said my name. I answered that it was me, and then it rang. I tried to call the number back, but it was unavailable, Victoria said. "And you're nervous about that too?" "Well, a woman called you. Maybe she got the wrong number, and the fact that she called your name was just a coincidence," Barry said. "I'm worried, Barry. It's just that first there's this phone call, and then a stranger comes up to our son." "Don't you think it's strange?" said the wife. "Put those thoughts out of your head. You're becoming an imaginative person. Are you getting old?" said the head of the family. Victoria was not convinced by her husband's words that there was no cause for worry. She kept thinking about the stranger who had spoken to her son. And the next morning, before John went to school, she turned to the boy. The mother asked her son not to talk to strange women who were acting strangely anymore. John looked at his mom in surprise and asked, "Why am I not allowed to talk to strange aunts?" "What if a woman asks for help?" "You are unlikely to be asked for help, as you are still a boy and unlikely to be able to help. I'm just asking you not to talk to strangers. A stranger may turn out to be a swindler and take advantage of your naivety or tell you all sorts of nonsense," the woman said. All this conversation between John and her wife was heard by Barry, who had the day off. The man waited until his son left and turned to his wife. "I can understand everything, but not that John should not communicate with strangers. You yourself just imagine that here you go with a child to the appointment and the doctor will ask John, and he in response will be silent, and all because you forbid your son to talk to strangers. And in the child's view, the doctor will be just a stranger. You're confusing God's gift with an egg. A visit to the doctor. It's one thing, but on the street to communicate with a stranger, it's quite another thing," nervously replied his wife. "Okay, I gave an unfortunate example, but still you do not need to scare the child. Tell me what's bothering you so much," Barry said. "Barry, dear, I don't know how to tell you. It's just that my heart is very troubled and I can't stop worrying. I wish I could stop worrying, but I can't. I'm already thinking that maybe I should see my son off and on from school," the woman said, almost crying. "You are talking nonsense. Imagine how our son will feel when his mother accompanies him to school every day. John will be mocked by his peers and told that he is a mama's boy," said the head of the family. "You're right about that," the woman said with a heavy sigh. "You really need to calm down, because your anxiety is turning into a manic state. Just know that we're doing great and get all your negative thoughts out of your head. My son and I love you," said the head of the family. Several days passed after this conversation between the couple. No strange incidents occurred during this time, and the anxiety in Victoria's soul slightly decreased. The woman even mentally scolded herself that she had actually become too suspicious. But Victoria's anxiety was not in vain, for one day, when the family was having dinner, they heard a dog barking in the yard. The housemates knew that if the dog made a voice, they had visitors. Barry looked questioningly at his wife and then at his son. The woman immediately replied that she wasn't expecting anyone, and John said the same thing. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The man got up and went to open the gate in the yard. Barry came out of the house and immediately noticed that the guests arrived in an expensive foreign car. He went to the low fence and opened the gate and saw two women standing in front of him. Only one was middle-aged and the other was a lady of respectable age. The owner of the house greeted the visitors in a friendly manner and asked whom they had come to see. The middle-aged woman, visibly worried, said, "I would like to see Victoria." "Then you're at the right place. Please come in, really. I don't know how to address you," the man said. "My name is Maria, and my companion's name is Elizabeth. But I apologize for being unannounced, and I'll tell you right away that we're not only here to see Victoria, but also to see you," the woman said. "Even so, you intrigued me from the very first words. Well, let's get acquainted. My name is Barry. I'm Victoria's husband," said the man, who at the moment was bewildered by the visit of the two ladies. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "But I have a favor to ask. We'd like to talk privately. I mean without John," Maria said, even more worriedly. Barry tensed at the last phrase as the woman said his son's name. He remembered that his wife had been very anxious lately. The owner of the house looked at the women warily and asked them to wait in the yard for a while. The man went into the house and told his wife that 2 guests had arrived, and then quietly told the whole conversation with the ladies. Victoria, as soon as she heard her husband's story, immediately looked at her son and faintly said that it was not for nothing that she had been feeling anxious lately. Barry tried to reassure her, but she only said that it was better to let these ladies pass, because it was better to find out what they needed right now. Then the woman called her son and asked him to go to his room and not to come out under any circumstances unless his mother or father called him. The boy looked at his mother in surprise, but then his father asked him to comply with his mom's request as well. John hummed resentfully and went off to his room. Soon the 2 guests were sitting in the kitchen, where Victoria was looking at them with a stern look. The lady of the house was looking at the middle-aged woman with a special scrutiny. She thought she had seen her somewhere, but could not remember under what circumstances and when it had happened. Maria saw that Victoria was looking at her and realized that the woman was trying to remember her. So she said, "Victoria, I am the person who once helped you. I'll help you remember. It was when you were robbed and you didn't know what money to use to go home, and you couldn't pay for a doctor's visit. I gave you money then." "That's right," Victoria said enthusiastically, and only wanted to hug her guest and thank her for her help when Maria continued talking. "You don't need to thank me because money is a matter of time. As they say, today you have it and tomorrow you don't. It is I who should thank you for my son, whom you named John. I realize I've shocked you at the moment, but please don't send me away at once. I started this conversation on purpose in John's absence. I don't believe you. You're lying to me. Yes, I'm grateful to you for helping me. But you knew perfectly well that I wanted to have children, and my husband and I did not work out. I opened up to you then, and now you come to me and claim John is your child. He's not. He's only my son." Shouting, Victoria said, and at the same moment grabbed her chest and quietly groaned. The husband instantly oriented himself and ran up to his wife, hugged her around the waist, and offered to call an ambulance. The woman flatly refused and asked only for a glass of water. Barry complied with his wife's request. Victoria sipped the water and quietly spoke to the guests and thanked her spouse for his care. At that moment, the 2 guests looked anxiously at Victoria. The women were very concerned about the well-being of the mistress of the house. And as soon as they saw that Victoria was a little better, the first to speak was Elizabeth, who said, "I apologize for myself and my sister-in-law. I realize that Maria's news was a great blow to you, but I beg you to believe my daughter-in-law's words. She really did drop her son off with you. Why are you here? What have my husband and I done to you? And in general, why should I believe your words?" Victoria said with tears in her eyes. After these words, Maria nervously pulled out of her purse 1 baby sock and handed it to the mistress of the house. Victoria, as soon as she saw the thing, she cried, as she realized that she was not deceived by her interlocutor. Victoria immediately recognized this sock, on which was embroidered the letter B. She had wondered years ago why the baby was wearing only 1 sock. Barry remembered this attribute of clothing as well. The man looked with hatred at the 2 women who had just now caused heartache to his spouse and him. Barry was not so worried about himself, but he was worried about his wife, as he knew that his wife was not allowed to worry. Meanwhile, Maria realized that Victoria recognized the child's sock, on which she herself had embroidered the letter B. Maria threw herself on her knees to Victoria and asked her only to listen. The mistress of the house could not say anything in reply, as she herself felt a lump in her throat. She left the kitchen and after a while came back and carefully handed it to her guest, and only then said, "I kept that sock. I accused you of all sorts of things, not knowing that you were John's biological mother. I thought you were a cuckoo for abandoning the baby, but at the same time I saw that those socks with the letters embroidered on them were made by a mother who cherished her child. Now please tell me why you did it. I can't hide that it's hard for me now, and I want to chase you out of the house with a broom. But I can't do it because the debt is red. But I want to tell you at once that you should not hope that I will give John to you. I will fight for him." Maria, having heard Victoria's answer, thanked her and tried to kiss her hands, but the lady of the house again asked her to tell her about herself. Barry saw that the decision to listen to Maria was not easy for his wife, and he asked her if it would be worth postponing the conversation for later. But Victoria refused and said that now was the time to dwell on the incident, and that it was not worth delaying it, as it would be worse later. And then she turned to the guest and asked her to tell everything. Maria only wanted to speak when John came into the kitchen and immediately exclaimed that he knew the strange woman. The boy said that it was this aunt who had spoken to him on the street. Victoria looked at the guest with a hunted look and then asked her husband to take her son away. Barry himself realized that John had nothing to do here now. So the man approached the child and affectionately explained that the boy now needed to be alone, as there was a serious conversation between adults. John hummed resentfully again and said that he was being ignored. Maria, hearing the boy's words, wanted to say something, but immediately saw Victoria's gaze, which said that if she said a word, she would never enter this house again. Maria silenced herself and only looked fondly after the boy who was leaving. Victoria saw her guest looking with tenderness and was once again convinced that the person she was talking to was in fact John's biological mother. The thought burned her like an electric shock and made her shudder involuntarily. She overcame the urge to chase her visitors away and dryly invited Maria to begin her story. Barry saw that his wife was holding on at the moment with the last of her strength, not to cry, and tried again to postpone the conversation. But Victoria did not let him do it. She said that she wanted to end this nightmare today once and for all. The man realized that to argue in this case with his wife was not worth it, and Maria, through her tears, quietly began her story. The woman first looked at the mistress of the house, and then at the joint photo of the family in a frame that hung on the wall, and spoke. "I was born in the village. My parents were the third child. We lived modestly, as my father and mother earned little money. And naturally from childhood, I dreamed of breaking out of my village and living in a big city, and of course to marry well. My dream was shattered because studying in the last grade, I fell in love with a guy, and soon after graduation, I married him. Family life did not work out with this man. I cannot even give you the reason why we separated. I'll say this, apparently, were with him very young, and did not have time to properly recognize each other, because immediately after the marriage began scandals in the same place, and he and I decided to divorce after a year of living together, which we did." Maria only wanted to continue her story as she was interrupted by Victoria, who said that the personal life of the interlocutor is not interested in her and her husband. The landlady added that she wanted to know why Maria had dropped the baby off at their house. Maria smiled sadly in response and continued her story. "I'm sorry, but I want to be honest with you to the end. Just like you, Victoria, were honest with me the day you were robbed. I'm not asking you for more, and I even hasten to reassure you that I'm not going to. Though I'll say more about that later. Now, if you'll allow me to continue. As I said earlier, my first marriage didn't work out, and I decided to go to the city to make my fortune there. I was very lucky, as I was able to get a job in a company store selling household appliances. I'll tell you right away that when I arrived in the city, I spent the first time sleeping at train stations, and only after I got my first salary, I rented a room. At my work, I met my second husband, Austin. He was buying a gas stove in the store. We got to talking, agreed to meet, and then everything went banal, as in the movies about love. Austin gallantly courted, gave expensive gifts, and said beautiful words. In consequence of all this, I got dizzy, and when he made a proposal, I happily responded with consent. And then there was an acquaintance with his parents, and then in speed, there was a gorgeous wedding. As soon as I got married, my husband forbade me to work. But I did not oppose it much, because in this case I had more time to cook my spouse a delicious dinner. And then soon I got pregnant. This news pleased my husband and his parents, and of course me first of all. In general, everything with Austin and me was good, and I was happy because there was a beloved man from whom I was expecting a child. We were well provided for financially. My husband, as well as his father, worked in the police and occupied not the last positions. Any woman could envy me the way I lived at that time. But here Maria paused and cried. Her companion came up to the storyteller and embraced her. Elizabeth stroked her daughter. And Elizabeth stroked her daughter-in-law's head and asked her to calm down. The older woman said a few more reassuring phrases and then added that the whole story should be told at this moment and not delayed, as it was quite possible that they would not have the opportunity to do so later. Mary looked gratefully at her mother-in-law, took a handkerchief out of her sweater pocket and wiped away her tears, and then continued her narrative. As I said earlier, things were great with Austin, but after the baby was born, everything changed overnight. I went from beloved spouse to housekeeper and maid. I ceased to interest my husband as a woman. He insulted me, humiliated me, called me a fat cow, and other offensive words, and all because of the fact that after childbirth, I gained weight. I tried to bring my figure to normal, went on a diet in connection with which I lost milk, and I stopped breastfeeding my son. All my attempts to lose extra hateful kilograms did not lead to success. I hated myself at that moment. And a few months after the birth of my son, when once again I decided to talk to my husband so that he behaved towards me more adequately, I got my first slap. And the sad thing is, my husband loved it. Since then, he has been raising his hand at me a lot, and it actually amused Austin. I tried to complain to his father, Oliver, to talk to his son. However, his father-in-law said he would not interfere in our affairs. I was shocked at what was happening in my situation, and at the same time I could not understand how my husband, whom I loved so fervently, so overnight changed towards me. In general, not to be verbose, I will say that after another scandal with manhandling, I informed my spouse that if he does not change his attitude to me, I was going to file for divorce. That's when I realized my husband was a real despot. Austin told me that if I just try to go to the registry office, I will have a bad time, and I again experienced physical pain. As it turned out, after this conversation, I got a concussion. That's when I was afraid for my life and for the life of my son. The only way out at that moment I saw only in that quietly leave my husband and then divorce. So I briefly thought I packed the most necessary things and went to my parents, but stayed there only one day, as there came my husband and his father, and with a scandal I was taken away. After that, I had a tough conversation with Austin's father, and he told me that if I ever pulled another stunt like that again, I would be disenfranchised and never see my son again. Oliver clearly mentioned several names of officials with whom he was friends, letting me know that his words were not mere bravado. Maria paused again. Maria looked down at the floor, and tears were streaming down her face, which she did not wipe away. And then the initiative was taken by Elizabeth, who said that it was very difficult to tell her daughter-in-law now, because then there were sorrowful events in their lives. The elderly woman continued the story instead of the daughter-in-law. Elizabeth said that after another scandal between Maria and her husband, Austin again raised his hand at the girl, and the latter, defending herself, pushed Austin away from her. The man fell unluckily and hit his temple on the sharp corner of the table, as a result of which he died. Here the old woman was silent. It was hard for her to speak further, for it was about her son. There was about her son. Short pause after Elizabeth's words, and then Maria spoke again. My mother-in-law said that I had committed a crime, and as a result I was very frightened. But don't think for myself. I was frightened for my son, for my own. John, I named him that, and you gave him the name John. I was afraid that Austin's father would take custody of him and raise him the way he had raised his son, a moral freak, a mean, callous, selfish man. All the more that Oliver, after my escape with my son, made it clear to me that they would take John to themselves and raise him themselves and raise him themselves. I loved and loved my baby, so I could not allow the boy to be made like Austin. I already at that moment realized that I was waiting for imprisonment and therefore desperately looking for a way out, where to hide my child. Initially, I wanted to my parents, but immediately realized that my son will be found there immediately. Then I thought about an orphanage, but this idea was also thrown out of my head. And at that moment, I remembered Victoria. I don't even know why the idea came to mind. I pulled out the cherished piece of paper with the address I hadn't thrown away then, and then I drove here. As soon as I arrived in your town, I first went to my neighbor's house to make sure Victoria still lived at that address. The neighbor confirmed to me that you live here. In fact, you can check with the old lady across the street that I asked about you. Well, then you already know everything. I put the baby carrier by your gate and ran away. Then I came back to my town, and I went to the police and told them what had happened. And then everything went on. There were endless interrogations, court proceedings, and as a result, imprisonment. Maria stopped talking and looked at Victoria. The mistress of the house sat pensive, as did her husband. There was silence in the kitchen for a while, which was later interrupted by Victoria. The woman said that she heard a story that was very similar to the plot of a modern TV series. Maria smiled bitterly and replied that perhaps it was, but she would not want to see this movie for real, as she had gone through all the vicissitudes of life on her own. Victoria looked at her interlocutor not only with judgment but also with disbelief, and then said, "Suppose I believe you, but I have a lot of questions. Ask. I have nothing more to hide from you. I realize that my story looks like a fantastic story, but I am in front of you at this moment, as if in confession, and before that my story knew only one friend. It is a pillow. And then I have already told Elizabeth everything," said Maria quietly. "You said that your husband's parents are practically monsters because they brought up their son a tyrant. But why are you now sitting here with your mother-in-law?" "In-law, she's a bad person too," Victoria said. "It's not that simple. Elizabeth has no authority in the family. Let's say she is also a victim of circumstances," said Maria, and she was interrupted by her mother-in-law, who said, "Dear masters of the house, the thing is that I married Oliver, and at first we had a wonderful life. Then we had Austin, and 3 years later I had another pregnancy, but I gave birth to a baby girl who lived only 3 days. After that, my husband and I began to have scandals. He accused me of the baby died, although it was not my fault. My husband's parents were also on his side, and as a result, my mother-in-law took Caustic to live with her. I tried to defend my rights, but I did not succeed. And Maria correctly said that I had no authority in my family. It would be possible to divorce, but I loved my husband and did not even think about it. That's how I lived, under the strict supervision of my husband, who allowed me to do only what I wanted him to do. And when Austin grew up, I realized that he was his husband's breed. Austin was a man of arrogance and stiffness. He could even say a harsh word to me. And when my son met Maria, I asked her if she was sure that she loved the chosen one and was ready to tolerate his harsh temper. Maria answered me that for her Austin is a light in the window and he idolizes her. I thought maybe I was being too critical of my son's character. And in the end, Maria's life wasn't so great either. So there was an irreparable disaster that no one expected. But I don't blame my daughter-in-law. In law for Austin's death, she did it without malice. It was an accident. My husband, however, thought the opposite and did everything he could to make sure that Mary was convicted to the fullest extent possible. And my husband was also furious that he could not find his own grandchild because Maria had told him that after the tragedy she had spent the night at the train station, where she had fallen asleep and the gypsies had stolen the child from her as a consequence. I would have been glad to help my daughter-in-law in any way I could, but Oliver forbade me even to speak Maria's name. And then you heard that my daughter-in-law was locked up and I couldn't have any contact with her. That's kind of the whole story." After these words, the old woman was silent and only furtively wiped the tears that came to her eyes. After all this, Victoria looked at her husband. She was confused at the moment and did not know what to say in this situation. The woman on the one hand sympathized with the guests, but on the other hand, she knew that in front of her now was the biological mother of her child and his own grandmother, and Victoria had no idea what these ladies even want. His wife's musings were interrupted by the head of the family, who turned to Elizabeth with the words, "You say that you have not been in contact with your daughter-in-law. Then, something in your story is not consistent, because at the moment my wife and I see you together, and you are very caring to each other. So how did your husband allow you to travel here with a daughter-in-law he hates?" "You are right. Yes, we came with Maria. But what you haven't noticed is that in our story, my sister-in-law and I refer to Oliver in the past person. The thing is, my husband died a year ago of a heart attack. It was only after that I went to visit Maria in prison. For I told her that as soon as she was released from prison, she could come and live with me," Elizabeth said. There was an awkward pause. Victoria sat silently and nervously rubbed her glass in her hands. She wanted to ask the main question, but she was afraid to hear the answer. The mistress of the house again looked at her husband and the man as if he understood the thoughts of his wife. And Barry looked at the visitors and turned to the two of them, saying, "I understand that you did not come here to confess, but with some intention. My wife and I would like to clarify the purpose of your visit. If you think that you can take John away from us, you are deeply mistaken, because we legally adopted the boy, and now he is our son." The guests looked at each other, and the word was taken by Mary, who spoke faintly. "We understand that John considers you native mom and dad, and traumatized his psyche cannot be. I can't hide that I dreamed of taking my son in prison. But now I'll tell you directly that I won't do it because you have wrapped him with care and love, which I couldn't give due to circumstances." Here the woman paused. Victoria looked at her interlocutor expectantly and asked, "And what next?" "Next, you must also understand that John is also a dear person to me, and I cannot just throw him out of my head. And I have been advised by Elizabeth, whom I am grateful for the hint, because thanks to her I will become a mother again, not to the detriment of your relationship with John. I won't drag on and just say that my mother-in-law suggested that I baptize John, and I will be his godmother. And he can call me Mom, too. I know you didn't baptize him. I asked him that. John probably told you that he was approached by a strange woman, so it was me, as you may have guessed. Now it's up to you to decide, because I won't go against your will. But I'm ready to kneel before you so that you agree to this proposal. I promise you that the adoption will be kept secret. I'll just visit John, and if you don't mind, I'll take him to visit you once in a while. Because we live in a big city and there's a lot to see, and regardless of your decision, Elizabeth and I will help you financially, because the late husband of my mother-in-law had savings, and not bad, and now it all went to Elizabeth. And she, in turn, passed this money to me, and I am going to start my own business in the near future, namely to open my own bakery," said Maria, and looked into the eyes of the mistress of the house. Victoria sat there and couldn't say a word. She didn't know what to do in this situation. Barry was also silent, because after the whole story, he had a hurricane in his head, and all his thoughts were mixed up. The adults sat in complete silence in the kitchen, each thinking about his own thoughts. The pause lasted a few minutes, and only after the head of the family turned to his wife. "What do you say to all this, my dear?" "I don't even know. I need time to think," said Victoria. "Good," said Barry, and then turned to the guests. "We are very worried today, and can we ask you to give us time until tomorrow? My wife and I need to talk privately to make a decision. Come back tomorrow and we'll tell you everything. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. And again, I sincerely thank you both for loving my son with all your heart and surrounding him with care and attention. All my words of gratitude will not be enough, I know, but still know that I am indebted to you for the rest of my life. And regardless of your decision, I will respect and honor your family. And now we will leave and spend the night at the hotel, and tomorrow, if you don't mind, we will visit you again in the evening." Maria said, "Good. It's a deal. See you tomorrow," the man said, and went to see the women off. Victoria sat pensive after they had left. Soon the head of the family joined her and asked what she thought about it. The woman smiled sadly and said that she felt sorry for Maria, and added that it wasn't Maria's fault that her husband was such a despot. Barry nodded approvingly at her words because he thought so too. Then Victoria asked her husband how they would handle the situation. Barry looked thoughtfully at his wife and said that the decision depended on her. The woman was silent for a while and then said, "You and I must do what is right in our conscience. I will tell you my personal opinion, and then you will tell me yours. Maria gave us the child because she thought it was the only way to keep the boy safe from Oliver. And now I don't think we should push her away from us. So I think you and I should take Maria up on her offer. Let her be the godmother, and don't let it go on too long. You yourself remember that a couple of weeks ago I told you that it's time to baptize John. Especially my son has already repeatedly said so. Now you tell me what you think. I completely agree with your point of view. I think you and Mary and her mother-in-law will be great friends," said the head of the family. "So it's settled. You know, it's like a stone has fallen from my soul. It's so easy. And now it is necessary to inform about it, our boy. And I think we hurt his feelings by making him sit alone in his room. Tell me which one of us is going to bury the hatchet," Victoria said. "I get the hint," Barry said with a laugh, and then kissed his wife on the cheek and headed for John's room. Some time passed, and soon the man appeared in the kitchen with his son. They were discussing something cheerfully among themselves. The boy then ran up to his mom and quietly said that his dad had confided in him about some surprise his mom was preparing. Victoria laughed in response and mouthed, "Your dad didn't fool you. We are seriously preparing a surprise for you. You have reminded us several times that you want to be baptized, so we've decided to honor your request." "Honestly, you don't cheat?" exclaimed the boy in admiration. "Have we ever deceived you in your life?" answered the mother with a question to a question. "No, of course not. I just wanted to clarify. What a gift you've given me. I'll tell my friends about it tomorrow because they are almost all baptized." "Oh, can I run to the neighbor's bar right now and tell him about it?" John said. "Don't make up your mind. It's past your bedtime, and he'll tell me all about it tomorrow. And here's one more piece of news for you. There was a woman at our house today, and she will be your godmother. By the way, her name is Maria," Victoria said, and looked affectionately at her son, and then added, "Tomorrow you will meet her, and you can call her godmother. You are my favorite mom. But if there is another mom, I don't mind. But know that you will be my favorite mom," said the boy and hugged the woman. "Thank you, my son, for your golden words," said the mother with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, Maria and her mother-in-law rented a hotel room and discussed their recent meeting. Maria told Elizabeth that she was worried about tomorrow's visit to her family. The older woman tried to reassure her daughter-in-law, saying that Victoria and Barry would definitely respond positively to the proposal. Elizabeth saw that the comforting words had no effect on her daughter-in-law and decided to distract Mary in another way. The older woman turned the topic to the fact that tomorrow it was necessary to prepare for the meeting, namely to buy gifts. Maria looked at her mother-in-law with surprise and said, "Exactly. And I did not even think about it. Now we have to think of who to buy what for. Victoria, of course, a beautiful bouquet of flowers, and something from jewelry and gold. We can't buy a ring because we don't know the size of her finger. I think we can get a chain. Now for Barry, we can get him some expensive perfume. And we have only John, and here I am lost in guesswork, as I do not know what boys at this age are interested in. I don't even have to think. What do young people have on their minds these days? I answer you, gadgets, laptops, and other devices. John needs to buy a cool cell phone so he can show off, Elizabeth said. What would I do without you, Mom? Enthusiastically said the woman and hugged her mother-in-law. The next day, Victoria saw her husband off to work in the morning, and then her son. And after she went to the store, she already knew that today she would make a festive dinner on the occasion of her son's acquaintance with his godmother. Victoria bought a small cake in the store, as well as the necessary products. At home, the woman began to make half-finished products so that the time flew faster and still tirelessly thinking about the upcoming meeting. Meanwhile, John had already told his friend Sam, who lived in the next house, that his aunt was coming to visit him, who would become a godmother in the near future. He asked what time the woman was coming to see her. John responded by throwing up his hands, since he didn't really know. John promised his friend that as soon as Maria arrived, he would run to his buddy and tell him about it. On that, the friends agreed. Victoria waited shortly for her son from school, who asked a lot of questions about the godmother. The woman answered him with a smile, and herself unconsciously felt subconsciously a note of jealousy. However, Victoria mentally scolded herself for it at the same moment, because she remembered how last night her son had told her that she would always be his favorite mother. And then came the head of the family, who immediately caught the aroma of baked chicken with apples. The man approached his wife and hugged her with the words, "Decided to treat us today. I understand that the dinner is in honor of the fact that Maria and her mother-in-law are coming to visit us. You're so smart, aren't you? You should have been an investigator in the prosecutor's office, and then there would be less different swindlers and gangsters walking around in the world," said with a smile, wife. And then John intervened in the conversation of adults, who exclaimed joyfully, "Mom, do not worry, when I grow up, I will become an investigator or even a judge. And I forgot to tell you that at school I told all my friends that my godmother was coming to visit us today. I even promised Sam that I'd invite him to see Aunt Maria. He's terribly interested in it. He's probably already told his parents about it. He's the kind of buddy who can't keep a secret. So why did you tell him everything then, if he had a long tongue?" Victoria asked with a laugh. "Let him tell him because I told him the truth, not fiction," John said solemnly. "You're quite a shot," his father said with a smile, and rubbed the back of his head with his hand. The family gathered in the living room waiting for the guests. John kept looking out the window to be the first to report the new acquaintances, and when the boy once again looked out the window, he joyfully exclaimed that a cool foreign car drove up to their house and 2 women got out of it. The man at the same moment got up from his chair and looked tenderly at his wife, and then gently said, "Don't worry about anything. Everything will be fine. Now I'm off to meet our guests." "Don't gear, and I'm not worried," mumbled in response. After a while, the man returned with the 2 women. Maria looked at John and couldn't get enough of him. The boy was awkwardly shuffling from foot to foot. There was an awkward pause, and then took the initiative of the head of the family, who said, "Let's get acquainted. Son, here in front of you is your future godmother, whose name is Maria, and next to her is her relative. You can call her grandmother Elizabeth. And now I ask everyone to the table. My beloved on this occasion today has prepared a festive dinner and cannot wait to know what our distinguished guests will say about her culinary abilities. We are very pleased that you welcome us, but we do not come to you empty-handed either. This bouquet is for Victoria, so that she'll always be in good spirits. And now we will give you a small gift." Maria said, and with these words she handed the head of the family a bag of groceries and perfume. Then the woman went to Victoria and handed a box with jewelry, and only then went to John. Maria pulled out a cell phone to the boy and spoke. "And this is for you, son. From now on, I will only call you that because I will soon be your godmother. And you can call me Mom, too. I think Victoria will agree with me that John is twice as rich now that he has 2 moms." After the last words, Maria looked at the lady of the house, and she nodded silently in response with tears in her eyes. Maria hugged the boy the next moment, whispering in his ear that she loved him very much and was proud of him. And then Maria walked over to Victoria, and the women hugged without words. they understood each other. And Elizabeth, who watched all this in silence, also wept, and then called her grandson to herself and asked the boy, "Did they please you with the gift or not?" "Of course. It's such a cool gift. Everyone at school will envy me and ask me to hold such a cell phone in my hands," exclaimed the boy happily. Barry approached his wife and Maria and saw that the two women had tears running down their cheeks. And then he said, "Why are you being so damp when you should be happy? I think it is clear to everyone without words that the christening will take place soon. That means that we will all become relatives in the near future. So I suggest that we all start our communication in a kinship way, namely not to say you to each other, but to switch to the proverbial you. And now, if everyone agrees with me, I ask everyone to come to the table to celebrate this event. And let's do it immediately because I've just got off work and I'm very hungry." Everyone laughed at Barry's words and rushed to the table. Maria was talking to the hostess of the house, occasionally looking at her son, who was not so much occupied with eating as admiring the cell phone. The boy pressed different buttons, brought the cell phone to his ear, and then caught up and said, "Aunt Maria and I have a huge request for you." "I'm listening to you, son," said the woman. "I promised my friend that I would show you to him, but I don't want to be considered a liar at school. I told everyone today that I'm going to have a christening and a godmother, so please come out with me to the car and wait for me there for a while, and I'll run after my buddy," the boy said, embarrassed. "Sure, no problem. Get dressed and let's go." "Wait, why do we go alone with you? Let us go with us and your parents and your grandmother." To shock the public, Maria said with a laugh, and soon the whole family and the guests went outside. They went to the car and John ran quickly to his buddy. In a few minutes, John was already walking with his friend, and after them, Sam's parents came out and saw the expensive foreign car. Maria noticed the gawkers, and without knowing why, she decided that it was necessary to annoy the observers. And the woman suddenly hugged Victoria. The neighbors were shocked by this picture and opened their mouths in surprise. They knew that they lived from paycheck to paycheck, and they had no rich relatives or acquaintances. And here a stranger hugged Victoria and was to become in the near future godmother of John. From this they learned from the boy. Victoria realized only after a couple of minutes why Mary had done that and quietly thanked her. In response, the woman only laughed and said that soon the two of them will soon wipe the nose of all the neighbors, and then added, "You and I have nothing to share now. We are two mothers of a charming boy, and I thank you again for everything. We've been talking with Elizabeth, and we decided to suggest that you leave here and move to our town. We'll open our own bakery, especially since you cooked a delicious dinner tonight. You have a talent for cooking. We'll find something for Barry to keep him busy and bored. How do you feel about it?" "I can't decide right away. I need to consult with my husband," she said. "Don't worry about my husband. My mother-in-law took him into circulation, so he is already aware of my proposal." "Look at how your husband is being treated by Elizabeth," Maria said, with a smile, and pointed her hand in the direction of Barry and her mother. In her mother-in-law. Victoria looked and laughed, then suddenly stopped talking and looked at her companion. Maria noticed the woman's serious gaze and raised an eyebrow questioningly. Victoria looked at her interlocutor for a while and then quietly asked, "Answer only honestly, why did you drop off your son to us?" "I already told you why I did it, but I'll answer again. That time, when you told me about yourself in the women's clinic, I saw and felt your sincere pain that you could not have children. You were sincere at that moment and could not speak untruths. I also told you then that you were a good person and I was not wrong. And when I committed a crime, I honestly thought of you. And when I left my son with you, I did not even know whether the doctor helped you or not, as well as I did not know that you adopt a child or not. But I purely intuitively I felt that you and your husband will not leave at the mercy of fate, or rather our now baby. And I promised you that John will never find out from my lips that I am his biological mother. That's something only you and your husband can do. So you don't have to worry about that. I can keep my word. By the way, I also vouch for Elizabeth. And now that we've been so frank with you, you can tell me. Why did you name him John? Was it because he was wearing socks on which I embroidered the letter B? No. You said it yourself. We tell each other the truth. I just like the name John, and your embroidered letter was a coincidence, she said. Thank you for being honest, but the name John sounds pretty good. At that moment, Barry and Elizabeth approached the women. The man turned to his wife and told her that their family was being invited to a new place of residence in another city. Victoria smiled in response and said that she was already aware of the invitation. Barry looked first at Mary and then at Elizabeth, and then he said, I don't understand. I don't get it. This is what kind of court conspiracy you have going on here. I take it you've decided to work us over in your own way. Both women laughed, and Victoria laughed after them. Barry looked at them in bewilderment, and then he laughed too. John ran up to the adults and asked what everyone was laughing about, and Victoria, barely calmed down from laughing, said, It's just us enjoying life. By the way, I may surprise you with a surprise message. How do you feel about moving to the big city? Wow, we have surprises every day. That was definitely Mom Maria's suggestion. Am I right? Said the boy. You got that right. You're a grown-up. I guess you're just like your dad. But it's up to you whether we leave or not. I'm not going to push you. So you'll have to think it over, and then you'll give me your answer. And this weekend, we are going to be baptized. And until then, your godmother and grandmother will stay with us. Do you agree with that? Victoria said. Why ask when you know the answer? Of course I do. And now I have a question for Mama Maria, said the boy, and immediately turned to Maria. Ma Maria, and you me with Sam on your cool foreign car will not ride. No problem. Jump in the car and we'll go with the wind, said Maria, smiling at her son. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.